Welcome, Darkest Dungeon 2 travelers, to another entry into our Darkest Dungeon 2 guide set. Today we face our first confession, Denial. The Shackles of Denial are the first boss of the first confession of Darkest Dungeon 2. This fight can seem a little intimidating, but once you get the mechanics down, you're going to rock it every time. So let's begin with the primary core mechanic of this fight, and that's that 4 locks will drop from the ceiling, each of them trying to lock you out of a different action. And by you, I mean your entire team. So the first lock you see here will stop you from using melee abilities. The second lock will stop you from using ranged abilities. The third lock will stop anyone on your team from healing. And the fourth lock will stop anyone on your team from stress healing. This effect will only last for 1 round, and you will know which of the locks is affecting you because it will be the first action of the round. Now, they won't always be in the same order, so let's go ahead and take a look at these one at a time. First up is the Lion's Head, also known as the Latch of Regret. This is the lock that will lock you out of using your melee abilities. It also has the ability to cast a weakening token, which will reduce your damage, and that ability will hit the 1 and the 2 positions simultaneously. Next up, we have the Bolt of Lamentation. This is the lock that will prevent you from using ranged abilities. It also possesses a skill that can blind your characters called Mental Lashes, and this will hit the 3 and the 4 positions simultaneously. Next is the Padlock of Wasting. This is the lock that will prevent you from healing. It will also use an ability that will target a random position on your team and will either apply blight, bleed, or fire damage chosen at random. And last but not least, we have the Shackle of Despair. This is the lock that will prevent you from doing any type of stress healing. It will also cast a spell that will cause a lot of stress and damage to, again, a random target on your team. There are also 2 shared skills that all of the locks can use. The first one being Crippling Doubt. This is going to be a stress attack that does damage and stress and hits 2 random targets. The second one being Paralyzing Fear. This is a very dangerous ability that can stun one of your team members and also make them vulnerable. So now we understand the base mechanics of the fight and how all of the locks work. Let's talk a little bit about strategy, which begins with preparation. As with all layer bosses and confession bosses, the things you do throughout the course of your run, the items you save, and the preparation you do in the inn will allow for the fight to be much easier. And to that end, let's talk about Clarifying Poultice. This is a poultice that you can use in the inn right before you go to the mountain, and it will give you stun resistance. Typically, I try to save as many of these as I can find because being stunned can be very detrimental in this fight. Next up, we have Holy Water. This is really helpful to remove said stun. And then also Apples and Cheese. I like apples and cheese not just because it's a food that gives you health right before you go in, but also because it gives you debuff resistance. And this fight has a lot of different debuffs to deal with, so it'll just give you that little bit of edge to try to prevent some of that. And if by some stroke of luck you have tinned delicacies, definitely eat it before this fight. Amazing food, does everything you need it to. Additionally, we have Smelling Salts. This is another wonderful way to be able to remove the stun if you do get stunned. And last but not least, we have Medicinal Herbs. The reason I like this is even though it doesn't give any base healing, it's flexible in the type of dot damage that it can remove. So if you randomly get fire, bleed, or blight, it won't matter because you'll have the ability to remove it when you have medicinal herbs. And it may go without saying, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. Healing items are always welcome in any boss fight. So if you got them, feel free to bring them. And on that note, we have now done all of our prep work. We understand the base mechanics of the fight and how they work. So how do we beat this? Well, it's going to really depend on your team composition. So if your team is very heavy in melee skills, then you're going to want to focus on the Latch of Regret first. That way you're not locked out of melee skills at important moments and it will really slow you down in the fight. Conversely, if you're really heavy into range skills, then you'll focus on the Bolt of Lamentation instead. And there is definitely a school of thought for focusing on the Padlock of Wasting first, so that you can regain access to your healing skills as quickly as possible. However, I prefer to go after the shackle that's preventing me from doing damage. So if I'm heavy in melee, I really want to be able to do melee so that the fight doesn't drag on and on and on. The longer the fight drags on, the more problems you're going to have with sustain. This isn't to say that that's the right answer. I think it's more so to say that there's more than one right answer. It's going to be really based on personal preference and the team composition that you've brought in. That being said, I do typically always go for the Padlock of Wasting second, just in case I need a heal as the fight progresses. It's also worth noting that each time you kill a shackle, it will provide a buff to its allies. So for example, when you defeat the Latch of Regret, it will give a 20% bonus to the damage of the rest of the shackles. This is another reason why I like to do the Padlock of Wasting second, because with the damage increase, healing may be more important at that point. Which brings us to another point. If you're going to kill the Padlock of Wasting, keep in mind that on death, it will heal all of its allies. So maybe don't pump a bunch of energy into AoE or area of effect spells that are hitting everyone, knowing that they're all going to get a heal once it dies. So just to summarize where we are, I would typically kill the Latch of Regret from heavy melee, Lamentation if from melee ranged first, then focus on the Padlock of Wasting second, then the other damage, whichever was the opposite of Regret or Lamentation that I killed first, and then I save Shackle of Despair for last. This should give you the ability to control the fight, while also allowing you to have proper pacing so the fight doesn't last too long. And that about wraps it up. This is not an easy boss, but it is the easiest of the confession bosses, and now that you have all this under your belt, I know you can tackle it every single time. That said, there's going to be lots of people with other ideas, tips, and tricks that I would love to hear, and I know lots of other people would too, so feel free to drop those ideas in the comments, and that way other people could be the benefit of your failures, successes, or whatever the case may be. I've been Nomac, you have been beautiful. If you got what you wanted, press that like. If you want more, subscribe if you might. Until next time, good day and good night.